Well, it's no wonder that Paul had quite a number of instructions for Timothy. I mean, virtually the whole book of First Timothy and Second Timothy as well are instructions and encouragements. Well, one of the things that he gives instructions for in First Timothy 5, we looked at it last time, is in verse 22. Do not be hasty in the laying on of hands, and do not share in the sins of others. We talked about that. Keep yourself pure. Now, purity is a theme, a thread that runs all the way through the Bible. I didn't realize how often the idea of being pure and purity appears in both the Old and New Testaments. I just wanted to cherry pick a few of them. Paul wrote about it more than I had realized. I guess I hadn't. Here's the thing. I had read it, but I hadn't seen it. Happens all the time for me. Probably happens for you too. Well, anyway, in Philippians 4:8, this is a verse that in my counseling practice, I often assign it as homework. Paul writes, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. I call it, and I stole this from a friend of mine, Dave Dudson. I call it the Philippians 4:8 filter. If we can set our minds, if we can focus, and often that means refocusing, changing our focus to these kinds of things, and in the list, whatever is pure, it can change the way we encounter life, and certainly what we do about what happens to us. We're probably going to move on to 2 Timothy after we finish 1 Timothy, and in 2 Timothy 2:22, another piece of advice. Paul writes to Timothy, flee the evil desires of youth and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. There's tons and tons. And really, excuse me, I'm just going to hit this, maybe two more. This one out of Proverbs 16:2. All a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord. I could go a long time kind of pulling that verse apart and unpacking what I think is there in meaning. I'm going to just try to put it in a couple of phrases. One is, I often think I am more pure than I really am, right? All a person's ways seem pure to them. That's kind of like, what, me? What? I wouldn't do that. I've got a pure heart. Well, see, the purity of your heart is connected to your motive. And Solomon goes on to write, but motives are weighed by the Lord. The implication is, I don't think it's wrong that it certainly isn't wrong for us to desire a pure heart. But there are times when we misunderstand and we misjudge our own purity. But God never does. He totally sees through whatever we can't see through. And He judges our motive. That's interesting. But I'm going to move on to my last verse I want to point to. It's out of the New Testament, and it's in Matthew chapter 5. Comes out of the Beatitudes. Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart. And then here's the outcome of their purity, the pure heart. For they will see God. There's lots of different reasons to pursue a pure heart in relationships. A pure heart, having pure motives, where you're not faking it. You're not. You really are. There's purity of heart and intent and motive. Can you think of any relationship that can't be helped, improved, that's not important in? Marriages. Because I work in that area a lot, not exclusively, but a lot, helping an individual and two individuals and a couple to evaluate their motives. That's a pretty terrific challenge. Not everybody wants to evaluate their motive. What they want to evaluate is the other one's motive, right? Their focus has shifted away from their own purity of heart into accusations against the purity of heart for their spouse. This is natural, and it's not like this is a new phenomenon. It's been going on ever since Adam and Eve. Okay. The pure in heart are blessed because they will see God. The highest motivation for this heart motive desire, this purity, to pursue purity, I believe the highest motivation is because I want to see God. Now, if you've read through much of the Bible, especially, let me just put it this way. If you've read through the Bible, you know that there are a number of times in the Old Testament and a couple of times in the New Testament where it's not hinted at, it's clearly stated. You're not going to physically see God. The closest we ever came to that is, and it wasn't, we don't have this benefit, but in the first century, people physically saw Jesus. And when they saw Jesus, although a lot of them didn't realize it and rejected the idea, when they saw Jesus, they were seeing God. We have the privilege of seeing Jesus by reading his biographies, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But it's not the same as physically seeing. So, it's not, okay, how do you see God? How can one see God? Well, I'm not an authority on this. I can only address it from my own experience. And so I'll tell you how I most often see God. I most often see God in the principles from Scripture that express his nature. And my view of, my sense of, my seeing of God, and I'm glad it is, I don't ever want it to stop, but it is an expanding view and understanding of God's nature. I'm not there yet by a long shot, but I think, and I don't want to say, you should be as good as me. That's way not what I'm saying. But I am saying, I think I see more of him today than I did even, I'll give myself a lot of grace, last year. I see God in the principles that I encounter in Scripture because they show me his nature, what he is like, what he values. So that to me, and this is, people are very different in how they see God. but that's basically my number one way that I see God. The second thing is I see God in nature. I am not a nature boy. I don't take nature hikes. I don't hug trees, okay? I have allergies. So there are a lot of times of the year when, man, I can't hardly spend very much time out in nature. But when I get to, I see God in the beauty of his creation. I don't think I'll ever forget. I hope I never forget my first view of the Grand Canyon as an adult. It was breathtaking. I took pictures. This was back in the day when phones had really crummy cameras, right? But I had it was a little digital camera, and I took some pictures, and I love going back and looking at those pictures that they're more than 20 years old now. I love the beauty of creation. And I can't appreciate the beauty of creation as well as many, many other people. But I see God in creation. I see God in his work in people's lives, including my life. And one of the benefits of my occupation, my career as a counselor, is that my ambition is to partner with people and coach them to embrace God's design for their life. Really, I've told you my motto is helping you find your best life by discovering God's design and living within it. Well, when people do that, I get a front row seat to how God is working in their lives. And sometimes it is excruciatingly slow, with starts and fits and stops and starts and stops and resentments and anger. But as they move through, I see God's handiwork. And I love that. How do you see God? What are the portholes, right? What are context, venues that you personally connect and see God? That's a legitimate question. Gary Thomas has written a book called Sacred Pathways. And his idea is that there are basically 9 ways that people connect with God. It's a valuable read, but to be honest with you, it's a little bit of tough slogging because his writing style is pretty. It's not real conversational to me, but it's worth a read. Now, so first question is, how do you see God? Where do you see God? Second question is, in order to see God, you have to have a pure heart. And Paul says to Timothy, keep yourself pure. What does that mean for you? In specific, are there ways that you could engage with that would assist your purity? And that's on the positive side. On the negative side, there are things we need to get out of our lives. We need to get out of our patterns and habits because they keep us from purity. Or they hold us back, can hold us back from purity. We're going to come back to that next time. I know I'm camped out here on the idea of purity, but I'm making no apologies for it, and here's why. There is none of us who will at any time ever not need to focus on our purity. So, all right, I'll pick it up again next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.